Welcome back once again, everyone. This is your lecture series for Chapter 13 in your textbook, Give Me Liberty by Dr. Eric Foner. This chapter is entitled A House Divided, 1840 to 1861. The first section is entitled The Fruits of Manifest Destiny. The focus question for this section is, what were the major factors contributing to U.S. territorial expansion in the 1840s? As a result of territorial expansion in the 1840s, slavery, more important, the question of how slavery would expand as U.S. territory expanded, moved to the center of the debate in American politics. And this was stemmed from this explosion of migrants moving westward in this period, with Oregon and California particularly being very popular destinations. And this coincided and reinforced this belief in manifest destiny, that it was Americans' God-given right, and indeed their very destiny, to expand across the North American continent from coast to coast, Atlantic to Pacific. The question of the expansion of slavery alarmed some people as the U.S. began to look to expand into what was then Mexican territory. Much of that Mexican territory was below that old Missouri Compromise line. So if any of that territory was acquired, then technically, under the agreement that existed at the time, slavery could expand westward along those guidelines. As American settlers moved westward in this period, they typically ignored those international boundaries, and there wasn't much that Mexican authorities could do to stop them. The territory was sparsely populated and far away from the centers of Mexican power and authority, and Mexico exerted little direct control over those northern regions of their territories. Furthermore, growing commercial ties by the U.S. with California and New Mexico led some to favor annexation of these Mexican territories. Texas was actually the first part of Mexico to be settled by a significant number of Americans. The Mexican government actually invited American settlers into Texas in the 1820s in hopes to develop the area economically and strengthen its hold in the northern regions of its territories. However, as the influx of American settlers came in, the Mexican government became more and more leery of the American influence in that region, and by 1830 Mexico annulled many of the land grants they had granted to those American settlers and banned future American immigration. By that time, however, Americans greatly outnumbered the Tejano peoples in the region, those native Mexican, Spanish, and American peoples of that particular area. Many people demanded greater autonomy, including the right to own slaves, which had already been banned in Mexican territory. But many of those American settlers that had moved in were slaveholders and brought their slaves with them, and the others that moved in desired to acquire slaves to continue and expand the cotton production, which was very important to the East Texas economy in particular. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, this gentleman you see here, was the president of Mexico at the time and sought to impose greater central authority in those regions of Texas that these American immigrants had migrated to, which sparked the Texas Revolt as American settlers rose up in rebellion against this attempt by Mexico to impose its authority in the region. After the Texans won a military victory, they attempted to join the United States. But the president at the time, Martin Van Buren, refuses to annex Texas, essentially because he knew that would raise this question of the expansion of slavery to a very prominent position within American political debate. And this hesitancy on the part of Van Buren led to 10 years of Texas as an independent country in its own right. The question of the annexation of Texas remained on the back burner until it became a political opportunity for President John Tyler. Remember, John Tyler was the vice president of William Henry Harrison, who was elected in 1840, but died only a few months after taking office. And Tyler, being a Democrat, took that opportunity to try to push a Democratic agenda. Tyler argued that annexation would strengthen slavery in the United States, which, especially to Southern Democrats, was a very important issue in their platform. Abolitionists, of course, balked at this idea, and this further inflamed sectional tensions. However, in the election of 1844, a dark horse Democratic candidate, James K. Polk, won the Democratic nomination mainly with Southern support as a supporter of annexation and a slave owner himself. Polk won the election of 1844 in part due to that new Liberty Party that we discussed in the previous lecture series, that party that was formed as an abolitionist party. And this party siphoned votes away from the Whigs, which almost ensured, and in fact did lead to the victory of James K. Polk in the election of 1844. Congress, in Democratic hands at the time, declared Texas a part of the United States days before the inauguration of James K. Polk. When James K. Polk ascended to the presidency in 1844, he had four primary goals of his administration. The first was to reduce the tariff, which was still an important issue to Southerners at the time. He also wanted to reestablish the independent treasury system. He, too, was not a fan of the Bank of the United States. He also sought to settle the dispute with Britain over the Oregon Territory at the time, which up until then had been jointly administered by the United States and Britain, and was still a point of contention between those two countries. He also sought to bring California into the Union, which was seen as a very important acquisition for U.S. territorial expansion at the time. The first three goals were accomplished fairly quickly, but Mexico refused to negotiate at all regarding California. As a result, Polk ordered General Zachary Taylor to move troops to a disputed border area in southern Texas, which prompted the Mexican government to also send troops into that disputed border region. As a result, a small skirmish developed where there was casualties on both sides, and Polk went to Congress claiming that Mexicans had shed American blood on American soil and demanded that Congress declare war on Mexico for this transgression. War was declared, and the Mexican War was on. That concludes part 1 of our Chapter 13 lecture series. As always, study hard, and I'll see you soon.